Have you ever had an image in your mind and then you went out to do it and you just couldn't get it to work? Well, I've got this image in my mind of a moonrise at Rockwood Park. And I've done it 4 times and I think I finally got it. Let me show you how it looks. My name is Rob Skeoch. I'm a career photographer. I shot film for years and then I shot digital for years, and now I'm back to shooting film. I shoot mostly with a Hasselblad or a Nikon or a couple of Leicas. So near my house is a conservation area called Rockland, and I've gone there 4 times now to try to get a picture of the moon over this little cliff. Now, in my mind, it's a giant cliff like Halfdome and Ansel Moonrise Halfdome, which I have on the wall, and I can look at it and say, get inspiration from it. And also, it's easy to measure your failures against a picture like that because it's so famous. Now, the first 3 times I went to do this, it didn't work. Now, the first time, the sun was way set and the moon never came up in time. And then I started to kind of study moonrise charts and sunset charts, and I came up with this little formula where I would expect the moonrise to be, maybe an hour or 2 before the sunset. So the second time I went, total bust, it clouded right in, nothing. Third time I went, again, I've been looking at these charts and I thought, so if the moon rises at 4 o'clock, I'm in a valley, so it's going to be 4:30 by the time it gets there. And the sunset, if it's at 5 o'clock, say, it's going to be down too low at 4:30 when the moon shows up. So I've kind of done these weird calculations. The third time I went, it was looking perfect, and then before the moon showed up, it clouded over, so another waste. The fourth time, clear blue sky. It was a cold day. Clear blue sky. Now the moon was supposed to rise around 3:20 in town, and again, I'm in a valley, so I'm kind of looking at, maybe 10 to 4 o'clock. That's when I'm going to see the moon rise over this little cliff that I'm trying to photograph. Now the sunset on that day was 5 o'clock. So if you wait too close to sunset, you lose your direct light on the rock face. And if you wait too close to sunset, there could be big shadows and things like that. So on this day, 4 o'clock seemed to be the magic hour. The moon should be up, waiting for the moon, and the sun should still be up. So now the picture itself looks like this. And I use a Hasselblad with a 250mm lens. Now, if I had a longer lens, like a 350, which I don't have, I think it would be better with the 350, just a little bit tighter. But 250, and I can't get closer because it's water, like there's a lake in front of me, and you certainly wouldn't walk out on the ice because it'd be just too thin when I took this picture now. You could walk out on the ice now because it's been 15 below or 10 below for 2 weeks, but at the time it had only just frozen over. Now, my film of choice was some Delta 100. I shot 2 rolls of Delta 100, and I shot 1 roll of Ilford Pan F, which is a 50 ISO film. So the Delta 100 I shoot at ISO 60, and I generally underprocess it. And the Pan F I shoot at ISO 32, and I generally underprocess it. And I'm trying to darken the sky, so I'm going to try to use some filters. Now, the weird thing about the sky in this particular spot was it wasn't that dark. It wasn't really a deep blue. So it doesn't necessarily go as dark as you would expect. I did use a red filter. I did it with an orange filter. I probably even tried the yellow filter a bit, but mostly I went with the red and the orange to try to darken that sky. But as I mentioned, the sky was bright, even with the moon up. So you couldn't get that deep black that I was looking for. And when you look at Ansel Adams' famous picture of Moonrise on the Halfdome, I mean, the sky's pretty dark. He might have used a red filter as well, but the sky was pretty dark. Now, he's at elevation, and elevation, the sky goes darker, so maybe that's part of it. Now, the first ones I shot were with the Delta 100, and I've got the moon just coming up. So this is probably like 10 to 4, something like that. I've got full sun on the rock cliff, and then I've got the moon just starting to come up. So that was a good frame. So I'm using, as I mentioned, the Hasselblad. This was the 503 CXI, and with the Hasselblad 250mm lens. Now, and probably a cable release. So my exposure is probably like f16 at a 60th of a second to begin with, because the rocks have full sunlight on them. And then you have to compensate for the filter. But the first shot, again, it's starting to work. And I've got a couple of shots with my phone to kind of show you as the moon is starting to rise. So the first shot, the moon is starting to pop up. I was so excited to see it. The funny thing about this place is way in the distance, there's a water tower that is white. And I mean, I was there an hour early, probably maybe an hour and a half early before the moonrise, getting everything set up. And I looked at that water tower. I saw that water tower and thought it was the moon 20 times. And then, oh, it's the water tower. Oh, it's the water tower. Anyways, eventually the moon shows up and I was just so excited. So I shot the first frame, and then a little bit of time goes by and the moon is rising a little bit. Now, there's a problem with some of my negatives. I've noticed that they are a little bit lighter, the prints on the edges. So I would blame that on processing. I've been using a processing technique where it's the Ilford style, where you agitate 4 inversions every minute. But I'm going to go back to the Kodak style, which is every 30 seconds you agitate for 5 seconds. So I just found that maybe the edges were getting a little bit more processing than the middle of the film with the 120 film. So I was a little disappointed with the quality of my negatives. Plus, you've really got to be careful with this amount of sky that you're not getting any fingerprints on the negatives or any bubbles that, you know, that they would be hidden in the trees if you got a little air bubble in the developer. But in the sky, everything shows up. So just something to be careful of. You really want to have your A game when you're processing this film. So the moon starts to rise. Now, the moon was not vibrant, full white like I was hoping. And I think that's just because it was just over the horizon and the sky again was very light. And the sun is still shining on it. Like 2 hours later, the moon was so vibrant because of the contrast of all the dark sky. But at this time, I couldn't really get it to really pop as a white. Now, if I dialed the contrast up in the print, I could get it whiter, maybe. It's kind of a mid-tone, but then my rock with the direct sun on it, it would go overly white. I would lose detail there. So it's kind of like a selective area where I've got a bit of moon and I've got a bit of the rock face. And I really have to burn on every print. I've got to burn the edges a little bit because I've got that uneven development that I was talking about. I think I'm finding Delta 100 to be my standard film, but I did also shoot, as I mentioned, some Pan F. Now the Pan F, you don't really notice any particular difference, any advantage with the Pan F over the Delta 100. So it doesn't seem to be less grainy. Maybe it is, but the grain's not really an issue in either of these. The extra stop with the Delta 100 is useful because it's just, faster shutter speed or a little more depth of field. But I didn't really see a huge advantage with the Pan F. I've been shooting it a little bit. I didn't shoot it too much in the past. I just found it was too slow. As a news photographer, you wouldn't be shooting a film that was that slow. But I have been playing with it. But I think I'm going to concentrate more on the Delta 100. Your life is simpler if you can just eliminate some of the variables. So the Delta 100 will become my main film. And I'll finish off the Pan F, but I'll probably just stay with the Delta 100 for the most part. And then if I'm going to add another film, maybe I'll add like rolling infrared, something that's totally different. So the moon is coming up. The sun is still up. Now all these exposures took place in less than half an hour. So certainly before the sun went down, I was leaving, because the moon was so far up in the sky that it really wasn't a pleasant composition. It was just too spread out. There was a sweet spot, probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes, where the moon was at a great height. I could see the moon. It was at a great height, but it wasn't too far out of the picture. And the sun was still kind of shining there, full sun on my little island. Anyways, I got it to work. This is the best that I've done. Now, when I compare it to that Ansel Adams picture, it's going to be disappointing. And you don't really want to compare your pictures to Ansel Adams all that often. You're not going to be too satisfied if you do that. The other thing I wanted just to mention was these prints are all full frame, and there's some little pieces of tree and stuff sticking in here and there that either I didn't notice, or maybe the camera's not exactly 100% full frame or visualizing the 100% of the full image. But I'd have to crop these, I think, a little bit just to clean up some of these little tree branches that are sticking in arbitrarily here and there. But overall, I was very pleased. It took me 4 times. The sun and the moon cooperated with me, and I was able to get this picture that, in my mind, is my poor man's version of, the moon and Halfdome. This is a 20-foot cliff. Halfdome is, 1,200 feet or whatever Halfdome is. I'll have to go and look. But I'm glad that I was able to kind of learn this one thing about the moon. You want to sort of Google, when is the moonrise going to be in your area, and when is the sunset on that day. So sometimes the moon rises at 8 p.m., but sometimes it rises at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you've got to kind of find that sweet spot where the moon is up and the sun is still up, and then utilize that little window to get the best picture you can. Again, mostly I used a red filter, sometimes an orange filter, mostly Delta 100, shooting with the Blad, 250mm lens, using a tripod, using a cable release, having fun. It was cold. I'm always cold, it seems. It always seems to be 5 below or 15 below when I'm out shooting. Anyways, this is the Moonrise over Rockwood. I don't remember what it is. There's a Rockland and a Rockwood, but I think this was Rockwood. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get a chance to shoot your own moonrise.